everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very, very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Kimberly, it's great to be here again. My name is Terry Tucker, and I'm from Denver, Colorado.
Great. And thank you for joining my show once again. I've had a couple of people rejoin, and it's amazing, and I enjoy the experience. So can we talk about your past leading up into your present, and then I'm gonna dive through on your bio.
Sure. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from my voice or from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was that I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who are both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, and then I went to work for the hospital that actually cared for my father and my grandmother. After that, I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And one of the things I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But for the last 12 years now, I have been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then just finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow. So are they at Vandenberg Space Force?
So actually, she went to tech school at Vandenberg. So she spent a year at Vandenberg. She came to Denver and was working at Buckley Space Force Base. She's now in Florida. And then next summer, she's actually going to be in Colorado Springs.
Oh, I know that's a busy gal.
Yeah.
So tell me, before we dig into the horrific things such as your cancer, your rare form of cancer, how was it being a SWAT negotiator?
It was everything you can imagine. I mean, yeah, I understand usually your next door neighbor is not a hostage negotiator in that, but it was amazing. I learned so much about communication and how we communicate with each other. And you know this, and I think your audience knows this, whatever relationship you have in your life, whether it's, parent-child, whether it's the friends you have, whether it's your boss, whatever it is, the overarching theme of that relationship is trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have much of a relationship. And the problem we had as negotiators was we were trying to negotiate with somebody who was obviously having the worst day, more than likely, of their life. And we had no idea why a lot of times we were there, and we'd never met this person or understood their background. So we're trying to develop trust. And we did that with what we called tactical empathy. And I think you can get rid of the word tactical and just go with the word empathy. And basically what that means is help me to understand where you're coming from. Not necessarily agree with you, but just help me to understand, because empathy builds trust, and trust gets me to a point where I can start to try to change behavior.
Wow, that is amazing. And how did you what have you seen being a police officer and a SWAT a former police officer and a former SWAT negotiator that police officers see that normal people don't see?
I think first responders in general, whether it's law enforcement or fire or EMS, we see the ugly side of life. We see man's inhumanity to man, where we treat each other horribly, and we we do things to each other that you just don't want to see, especially when it happens to children, especially when it happens to young people and things like that are innocent and that don't have a chance to get out of that. And that's one thing that you really have to focus on. I mean, there's a higher incidence among first responders of divorce, of alcohol abuse, of drug abuse, and things like that. And I think that's just a way to medicate yourself from the things that you see. And I never, I worked with some great people that I cared about deeply, but there was always hey, let's go out to the bar afterwards and have a drink and kind of unwind. And I never did that. It was like, no, because my sanctuary, where I got that peace for me, was my family. I said, no, I'm going home. I'm going to spend time with my family, with my wife and my daughter, because that helps me to decompress. Those are the people that love me unconditionally. Those are the people that care about me unconditionally. And I didn't share a lot with them, but that's where I got my sanity, for lack of a better word. I wasn't going to find it in the bottom of a beer can or a bottle of booze.
Well said, Mr. Tucker. And before we move on to your condition, if you had to change something about the police department with seeing like death and being in crossfire, gunfire, and almost putting your life on the line as a decorated police officer, what would you change regarding mental health?
Yeah, when I was a police officer, and it's been a couple decades now since I've been into that line of work, mental health was starting to become something that departments were concerned about. That it wasn't just go out there and you deal with it the way you deal with it. We had programs in place to help people deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. To, like you say, watch a kid burn up in a car. I remember one of my first runs as a rookie is I took 2 kids that had been burned up in a fire to the morgue in the scout car, in a car that we had that would transport dead bodies. And that was horrible. I mean, these 2 young kids, hopefully they died of smoke inhalation and didn't burn to death. But, I'm taking these charred bodies to the morgue. And you see that stuff and you can't unsee it. You can't not see it. So I totally agree with you. We need more programs for mental health. We've got to be willing to come forward and say, hey, I'm not that tough. I'm not that strong. I need help. It's a sign of a strong individual to admit when they can't handle something, when they can't deal with something. So anybody who's listening to us that's in that regard, whether you're in law enforcement or first responders, or whether you're just a person in the community, if you need help, be strong enough to ask for it, because there are things out there that can help you. And why would you want to suffer in silence?
And well said, by the way. And tell me about as much as you can about your debilitating condition, and what have you been doing to bring awareness to it for the rest of the community that's possibly going through what you're going through?
Sure. So I have a very rare form of cancer, and it started for me back in 2012. I was a girls' high school basketball coach when we were living in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my 3rd toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And Kimberly, he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally, he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun and it affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. Mine has nothing to do with sun exposure. Mine just appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended I be treated at MD Anderson Cancer Center, one of the probably best cancer hospitals we have in the country. And so I did. And I remember when I was diagnosed in 2012, they told me more than likely I would be dead in 2 years, that they had nothing to offer me other than surgery. If there was someplace they could cut it out, they would cut it out. Other than that, we have nothing to offer you. And I thought, well, you've given me a death sentence. Maybe I can take that death sentence and turn it into a life sentence. And that's really what I've been doing for these last 12 years. I've been podcasting. I've been writing books. I've been doing things just to get awareness of cancer out there, because it's a word that conjures up just tremendous fear in individuals. And what I found in the last 12 years is that cancer is more and more moving from a terminal disease to a chronic disease, kind of like diabetes or high blood pressure or something like that. It's something you're going to have, but it's also, in many cases, something you're able to live with.
Well said. And have you have there been any advancements for the rare cancer that you have? Have they been researching on it? How's that working out?
They have. So I was on a drug for 5 years because, as I mentioned, they had nothing to offer me. So my doctor put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon, basically, as she used to say, to kick the can down the road. And I took a weekly interferon injection every week, and it gave me terrible flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having a bad case of the flu every week for 5 years. And that wasn't a cure. That was just, we're trying to punt this down the road. Eventually, the interferon became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. So at that time, interferon was the only therapy they had. I'll fast forward now to today, where I am on a clinical trial drug, and this drug is not available to the public yet. It's still being trialed. And the interesting thing about this drug is it does nothing to the cancer. But what cancer does to proliferate, to grow in your body, is it secretes an enzyme or a protein that hides itself from your own immune system. And what this trial drug does is go into my body, wipe out that protein, wipe out that enzyme, so that my own immune system, just like when we get a cold virus or a flu virus, can say, hey, that doesn't belong here. We need to go fight that. We need to go attack it. So I've been able to be stable for the last 3 years now on this clinical trial drug because my own immune system is able to identify it as cancer and able to fight it.
Wow. And how long have you as a whole been fighting this long battle with cancer? And when again did the doctor tell you you had 2 years to live?
So I've been fighting it for 12 years, and they told me I had 2 years to live back in 2012.
Okay. And have you went to like large amount of speaking events to talk about it? Have you been on a TEDx talk yet, or how's that working out?
I have not been on a TEDx talk yet. I am still, unfortunately, I have these tumors in my lungs, and I go to the hospital every 3 weeks for the entire week. And I'm treated for, it takes about 6 or 7 hours. And so that whole week, I'm just out of commission. I don't do podcasts. I don't write. I really don't. I just try to survive. And then I get those 2 weeks off, and I'm able to do things like this. I have spoken now that, COVID has kind of is a little bit in our rear view mirror and things are opening up more. I've spoken to banking conventions. I've spoken on webinars. I've spoken to high school sports teams. I've spoken to patients in hospitals. I really will speak pretty much to anybody that is interested in hearing my story. I love speaking to young people because they're like sponges. You know, they'll pick up the things, the information that you have, the experience, the wisdom, and they can use it, and they can use it to make their lives better. So I love speaking to young people in that. So it's wherever I get the opportunity to do that. And when I can't speak in person, I'm fortunate enough to be on nice podcasts like you or like yours, you know, and to keep those relationships alive. You know, I mean, you and I got together over 2 years ago, and now we're still together. You know, we still have that relationship, and I love being able to have that relationship with people like you. So thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome. And the same goes back to you. You know, I appreciate you coming on to my show again. And what have you been doing to help yourself with the symptoms? Like, how has the drug actually gave you symptoms that it's like the Inferion or the Inferion?
It does. I have it's kind of funny because you can almost set your watch by the fact that I am infused with this drug, and somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours after the drug is infused in me, I start to have a terrible reaction. I shake very violently. It looks like I'm freezing, but I'm not cold at all. I get very nauseous. I throw up. I have a fever. I have all these wonderful symptoms, and they give me medicine that helps me to deal with those things. But it's every day. It's, you know, Monday, and then I'm going to come back on Tuesday, and then I'm going to come back on Wednesday, and the same thing happens. And excuse me, it's been happening for the last 3 years. Now, I know that sounds really horrible, and it is. But the good thing is, because my body reacts this way, it's using the drug to help me with the cancer. There were people that were on this trial with me that unfortunately have passed away, that the drug didn't do anything for me. Their body didn't use it. Their body didn't react. It's called a cytokine reaction. They didn't react to the point where it didn't help them. As much as this ugliness and this, you know, throwing up and shaking is bad, it also lets me know that my body is using it appropriately to help me at least stay stable with the tumors I have in my lungs.
If you have to give a piece of advice to the people that have rare forms of cancer and want to research it or try to do what you're doing, Sari, what would it be?
That's a great question. I guess I would tell you to be careful. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, and that's great that it's available. But understand that, you know, I have no medical background. I've learned a lot about medicine and how it affects my body through this 12-year journey. So if you're just starting out, I would say ask your doctor a bunch of questions. Ask him or her, you know, what are we going to do? And why do you want to do this? And what are the other alternatives that might be available to me? And what are going to be the side effects? And just ask as many questions as you can. It's your right. It's your responsibility as a patient to ask those questions. And Kimberly, I've seen so many people that get cancer and they just turn their entire life over to somebody in a white coat with a bunch of initials after their name and say, whatever you say, I'm going to do. I'm not like that. I want my life to be based on the decisions that I made, not the ones that I didn't make or that somebody else made for me. So I'm constantly asking questions. What about this? What about that? I would also tell you to try to educate yourself. I'll give you an example. I was reading an article about these two doctors in Portugal that were using DHA, which is a fatty fish oil that is supposed to be really good for your heart. And they found that while doing experiments with this oil regarding the heart, that cancer cells that picked up this fatty fish oil, it acted like a Trojan horse and killed them. So I immediately went to my oncology pharmacist and I said, hey, I want to start on fatty fish oil. Are you okay with that? And I've got a wonderful clinical pharmacist, and she's like, hang on a second, let me go research it and make sure it's going to be safe for you. And so she did research it. And then she came back to me and she said, Terry, we don't want you to do it. And I said, okay, explain to me why not. And she said, because in 2017, you had a blood clot in your lung because of the medication you were on. You are now on a blood thinner, and DHA thins your blood even more. So you would be at a higher, there'd be a higher probability that you would have a bleeding incident. And we certainly wouldn't want that in your brain or something like that. So we would rather you not take this because we feel the side effects of a potential bleed are greater than what it would do to help your cancer.
Wow. I am so sorry. I know you're brave. I am, like, seriously. I hate that you're going through that. Like you say, you are a cancer warrior. And tell me, where are you going in the future with everything?
So I'm still doing podcasts. I've probably been on close to 700 podcasts around the world with different hosts. I can't. I'm not going to say I can't. It's very difficult for me to travel. I had my leg amputated in 2018 because of the cancer. I'm in a wheelchair. So being able to connect with people in the UK or Australia or Africa or India or China or whatever, it's a way for me to kind of travel without having to leave my home. So I absolutely love that. I'm working on a second book right now. My first book was about success. The second book is going to be about another word that starts with the letter S, and that's significance. You know, success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for other people. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you can be both successful and significant in life, but I always wanted to write a book about my thoughts on how people can be significant in other people's lives.
And if you wanted to highlight anything or talk to the people for 2 minutes, you have the floor, Terry.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't like to come on podcasts and hawk things like, go buy my book and stuff like that. The book is called Sustainable Excellence. If you are interested in a copy, you can get it anywhere you can get a book online. Let me say this, and I think this is pretty powerful. There was a writer by the name of Ernest Hemingway who wrote a lot of books, but one of the books he wrote is called Farewell to Arms. And in that book, he has a sentence, and I love this sentence, and it means a lot to me. And this is what he wrote. He said, life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So understand that in your life, things are going to happen to you. You're going to lose somebody who's close to you. You may unexpectedly get let go from your job. You might find out you have a chronic or a terminal illness. Life is going to break you. Life is going to beat you to your knees. But just like if you were to break your arm and they would put it in a cast and it would heal, your arm would be stronger at that place where it was broken. The same is true about our lives. If life breaks you, don't let it beat you. Use it. Get stronger when you heal and move forward in your life. Like I said, life's going to break everybody, but be that person who is stronger because life broke you and you're able to keep moving forward.
Terry, is there a way we can reach you?
Sure. I have a blog / website called Motivational Check. I put a daily quote thought for the day up, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it in your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can get access to my social media there. You can also leave me a message, and that's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Have you ever did a commercial, 30-second to 2 minute? Because you already are on my commercial feed, but have you ever did a commercial on, like grit, determination, and what it takes to be determined, smart, and very bright, like cancer patient?
I have never done a commercial. No, I've
to
never done anything like that.
like to just bring to the people about what kind of form of cancer you have and how, anything, I'm not trying to showboat or mess up the show. I just feel like in my heart I would like to say this live. I extend that to you to talk about it if you want to. You don't have to. You won't mess up the show, but I just really feel like you need to get this story out. You will always forever be on my commercial feed, Terry.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess I would. I'm trying to see where I want to go with this, but I appreciate you offering me this opportunity. I mean, we're all going to die at some point in our lives, and I love the old Stoic philosophers that used to talk about what was called memento mori, which meant remember death. Remember that we are going to die in our lives, because if you remember that, it helps you to live more powerfully, more purposefully, more resiliently in your life. And so I love talking about death. And one of the nurses who cares for me, who used to be a hospice nurse, and for those of your audience who don't know about hospice, it's people who take care of others at the end of their life. She recommended a book to me called Imagine Heaven. And the book is about people who have near-death experiences. And there was a lot of interesting information in it, but one of the biggest takeaways that I had with that book is that no matter who the person having the near-death experience saw during their experience, whether it was Jesus or an angel or a saint or a friend or a relative, almost everybody got asked one question. And that question was, how do you care for my people? In other words, how do we care for each other? And you go back in the Bible and people ask Jesus, what's the most important commandment? Well, love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the second is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what that question was about. How do you care for my people? How do we take care of each other? Nobody does anything in life, whether it's battle an illness, whether it's start a company, whether it's coach a basketball team, in the abstract. They don't do it by themselves. There's always other people that help you be successful in life. Be one of those people who help others to get to where they want to be in life. It's a tremendously rewarding feeling. Understand you're going to die, but understand that more importantly, it's not about dying. We all get that once. What's important is living. And very few people truly, truly, truly live their lives. And I'll end with this. There's a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago that goes like this. When you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
That's powerful. It got me almost in tears. Okay. How can the people find you?
Yeah, motivationalcheck.com is my website. So if you go to that, you can leave me a message there. And I answer every message that I get as long as it's in English. If it's another language, I have a really hard time. So if it's in English, I will be more than happy to answer it.
Well said. Thank you so much, Terry Tucker, for joining my show again. And I would love to have you come back within 6 months to a year. So stay on the line. You guys take care, and I'll see you guys another time in the next couple of minutes.